Super. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining this webinar today. It's our last webinar, so I hope everybody really enjoys it, and you're all very, very welcome. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we start. So just to let you all know that this session is being recorded. You can have your cameras on or off, whichever you choose, but please note that you will be muted for the duration of the two presentations. If you have any questions during the presentations, you can pop them into the chat box, and we will address all the questions during the Q&A, which are after the two presentations. So as I said, you're all very welcome. We have students and business professionals here from all over the world today that are completing our MOOC, which is our massive open online course from the Edify EDU initiative. It is a project co-funded by the EU with 12 partners involved that span over 5 countries, including Ireland, Greece, Italy, Finland, and Germany. I'm very happy to be your moderator today. My name is Laura Stern. And we are delighted to welcome our two guest speakers. We have Eamonn Crowe and Alexandra Majkic. A little bit about each presenter before we begin. So Eamonn is going to speak to us about EDI Essentials, a beginner's guide to employee rights and protected characteristics. A little bit of background on Eamonn. Eamonn is the director and co-owner of 3 businesses in the Greater Dublin area, including the popular Thai Red Torch Ginger restaurants and Reece Aesthetics. In addition to leading successful businesses, Eamonn serves as a lecturer in law, business and equality at the Institute of Art, Design and Technology. Eamonn brings diverse knowledge from both the business and academic worlds. And as an openly gay man in business and academia, Eamonn offers a unique perspective on equality. Passionate about equality, diversity, and inclusion, he is dedicated to fostering meaningful discussions on these important topics. Alexandra's title for today is EDI in Employment, Breaking Unconscious Bias, Building Better Workplaces Through Awareness and Action. Alexandra is an expert trainer in diversity and inclusion and a keynote speaker with 15 years of experience in high tech. Alexandra helps companies create inclusive cultures and supports individuals in progressing their careers with confidence. She is a change maker who helps clients create a lasting impact on their talent and organizations. So welcome to you both, and welcome everybody here again this afternoon. Eamonn, whenever you're ready, if you would like to begin your presentation, and then we'll follow by Alexandra's then.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to be here. I'll just share my screen now. And hopefully it works. Can I ask, are you seeing my presentation only? Yeah. Okay, great. We'll kick off. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to talk to you about EDI Essentials for Employers, a beginner's guide to employee rights and protected characteristics. This tends to gear around, although we're not labeling against specifically discrimination, this tends to gear around discrimination, what it is, and how employers who are getting into this and figuring out, well, what can I do with EDI? This gives you the foundations or the fundamentals of what much of it is based off afterwards. So we'll go to the first slide. The introduction. So these are instruments. These are EU instruments that serve as a legal basis for the directives combating workplace discrimination. 2 of them are the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union, or the TFEU, Article 19 of that. And then we also have the Charter of Fundamental European Human Rights. So it is important to note that the EU is committed to equality and non-discrimination through its foundational treaties. Article 19, specifically the Treaty on Functioning of the European Union, empowers the EU to combat discrimination based on protected characteristics. We will go through the list of those in a moment. The Charter of Fundamental Human Rights of the European Union consolidates rights such as dignity, freedom, and equality as a key document that supports these principles. The Charter of Fundamental European Human Rights is a document from the late noughties that basically brings all of the rights of the citizens of the EU together into one modern document, because before that they were scattered all over the place. to make things easier, they brought them all together in this charter. Okay, so we'll move on to the next. So just you'll see one slide where we will just explain what discrimination is, and you'll be able to apply it in context to afterwards. So what is discrimination? So we have direct discrimination. So this is treating somebody unfairly or less favorably based on a protected characteristic such as race, gender, or age. And of course, there are more that we will go through. This occurs when a person is explicitly denied equal treatment due to these characteristics. So it tends to be very obvious when it's direct discrimination, tends to be very obvious. Next one we have is indirect discrimination. So this is a policy or practice or rule that appears neutral, but disproportionately affects a particular group. It occurs when the impact of a rule disadvantages people with a specific characteristic. So an example I will give, and I'm aware that we're talking to multiple countries here, but we have an extra protected characteristic in Ireland in national law, which means that one cannot discriminate against members of the travelling community. So indirect discrimination might happen where a good or a service or something is offered to people so long as they have a home address. So this would indirectly affect members of the travelling community because much of them tend not to be of a fixed address. Then we also have another one called a discrimination by imputation. And what this evolves around, this looks at the intention behind discrimination. Okay, so it looks at if somebody is going to be denied a service because it is believed that somebody falls into a characteristic and they're denied a service. Now, it does not need to be truthful or accurate that they actually fall into that ground, but it's the intention behind what happens, that there is an intention to discriminate based on a ground. So this is discrimination by imputation. And then there's one that's not written down here, but I feel it should be mentioned, covert discrimination, where people know about all of these different things, but yet they find ways to discriminate against people without making it obvious. Okay, covert discrimination. I'll move on to the next slide. So when we go through this stuff from an employment context, to whom does it apply to? It's important here to mention before we start to contextualize things, the difference when it comes to these protections between employees and self-employed. So generally the EU and anti-discrimination laws are primarily designed to apply to employees, but protections can extend in specific contexts to self-employed individuals or contractors. Employers should aim, therefore, to apply equal treatment principles broadly, to foster inclusion, and ultimately to avoid potential legal challenge. Let's mention something here about self-employed people. So many EU directives exclude self-employed individuals because they operate independently, setting their own work terms and bearing the risks and rewards of their business. The directives primarily focus on protecting employees from issues like discrimination and workplace inequality, where vulnerabilities are higher due to less bargaining power. Self-employed workers have separate protections, such as the Self-Employed Workers Directive. Okay. For example, self-employed contractors cannot be denied work due to protected characteristics. So if they're going for a job or bidding for a job, they cannot be refused it because of one of the protected grounds, such as sexual orientation, gender, race, etc. Okay, so there is great coverage there. In recent times, Europe has also begun to address the idea of gig economies. Okay, gig economies working in the same way. So there's just increasing recognition of the fact that, you know, people, it could be who work in culture, the arts, or other things, where they get gigs sporadically. They would also be protected in the same way. Question now, beginning at the end of some of my mentionings, I do have questions just to pose. They don't need an answer now, but we might talk about it later. So the first question that I have here, how do your workplace policies ensure fairness for both traditional employees and independent contractors? And when I ask you this question, in many cases, I'm sure the answer is going to be, oh, well, actually, I haven't considered that yet. And that's an important thing to acknowledge. So we move now onto the actual protected characteristics that are recognized consistently across the EU. More characteristics can be recognized in national laws at national level, okay, but these are just the consistent ones across the EU. So we have age, disability, gender, religion or belief, sexual orientation, pregnancy and maternity, and nationality. These are the core characteristics protected by EU anti-discrimination laws in employment contexts. The protection ensures fair treatment and equal opportunities for all employees. The characteristics are embedded in EU directives and have been transposed into national laws in all EU member states. This list is consistent, as we said before, but there is room and there is scope at national level to incorporate extra ones into national law, like I've previously described in Ireland. It's included protected characteristics are members of the travelling community. I have a question for you here now again. Oh yeah, and sorry, these protections also to note that these protections, like all of the other, we're going to mention this time and time again, they apply at all stages of employment, including recruitment, training, promotion, and termination. So all from beginning to end. Okay. I have another question for you. Can you think of policies or practices in your workplace that might unintentionally disadvantage individuals with one or more of these characteristics? So let's move on to the first one, age. Okay. Age is one of the most common grounds for workplace discrimination, particularly against older workers. This EU directive is designed to ensure fairness across all age groups. So what employers must do is they must provide equal access regardless of age. An example of what not to do is to include a job advertisement with age limits, such as something that I must be under 30, or add preferential treatment for older employees without justification. It is important to note they are qualified by saying things can, on occasion, be justified, and I will mention that, but they are in limited circumstances when it comes to protected grounds. So an exception here, it might be a mandatory requirement. There might be a mandatory required age for health and safety. You know, that could be in the example of a firefighter, or issues relating to a legal working age, i.e. if you're under the age of 18. So there are very practical exceptions to these rules just to be aware of. Okay. An example might be a younger worker denied promotion because they're perceived as inexperienced, or an older worker excluded from training opportunities because they are seen as near retirement. Time for another question. Do your current policies or practices consider the needs of both younger and older workers? Disability. Like most of these, I must state also, we are going through these at lightning pace. There are massive discussions that can be had on all of these individual topics, and then they deserve them. Disability is particularly one of these that is very broad, and you have to excuse me, we are trying to get it into a very short space of time. So disability, this is covered by the Equal Treatment in Employment and Occupation Directive. Okay, disability protections go beyond non-discrimination. This is very interesting about these. They go beyond non-discrimination to actively require employers to make workplaces accessible. Okay, so this puts an onus on an employer to actively do something. Okay, note that this includes adjustments for physical disabilities. This could be ramps, but it also includes mental health disabilities, and this might require flexible working conditions. So it goes from tangible things to intangible things that need to be done. What does reasonable accommodation mean? It means modifications to the work environment. This could be adaptive technology, adjusted schedules, as we mentioned both of those before. And the legal, but important to note for employers who get worried when they see this, the legal obligation extends to things that do not impose a disproportionate burden on the employer. Okay. What might be a disproportionate burden on the employer? Well, it could be something, well, it's primarily got to do with cost. Okay. Not every business can afford to make all the adaptations that are reasonably required in order to make to improve accessibility for people with disabilities. Prohibited practices would be refusing to hire somebody because of a disability, or failing to promote an employee based on stereotypes about their disability. Okay. If we consider inclusion, how might we be inclusive with people who are suffering or living with disability? We could adjust the recruiting processes, making applications accessible, and building a culture within the work environment where employees feel safe disclosing their disability. Okay. Another question for you now. What is reasonable? So, well, reasonable is determined by the size and resources of the organization. Now you want to ask yourself, have you reviewed your workplace for accessibility recently? What small changes could make a big impact? So remember, it could be as small as, if somebody is using a wheelchair, just making sure that it's accessible. You might also now consider the idea of mental health and how flexibility would help somebody who is living with that. And just to have a think about things like that. It's not always big, massive, sweeping things that need to be done. They can be small and provide a big impact. Then we move on to gender. Gender equality, currently the cornerstone of EU law. Okay, it's getting a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of legislation provided for, not just with equal pay in recent years, but other things. It includes both biological sex and gender identity, or expression, be it transgender individuals or possibly to a lesser extent non-binary or others with gender identities or expressions, with diverse gender identities or expressions based on provisions made in law at national level by member states. Okay, so we have some that are dealt with consistently across the EU, and then there is scope for people to provide, or for countries to provide extra at national level. Employers must ensure pay equity for employees performing the same job regardless of gender. It covers access to promotions, training, working conditions, fair treatment during pregnancy and maternity leave. That's covered here. The latter will also be covered later when we talk about pregnancy and parental leave. What might a positive thing that one could do around gender? Well, a positive thing to do would be to make pay structures transparent, to eliminate gender pay gaps. Everybody knows what to expect for what type of work. A negative thing to do would be to not promote a woman due to assumptions about childcare responsibilities. Here's the question at the end of this one. So what measures are in place to support employees undergoing gender reassignment? So I've thrown this one in here on purpose because it is covered at EU law, where it's about, it's long traditionally been dealt with as binary as male and female. But it has come both EU level and at lots of national level that whether explicitly stated or not, it does cover transgender. Okay, some of the other ones are when it comes to non-binary or other diverse expressions of gender. It's being figured out, I say politely, but it is covered. Just like men and women at the moment, transgender is covered explicitly, okay, based on EU judgments in the Court of Justice, the European Union, etc. So I put this question in here. What measures are in place to support employees undergoing gender reassignment? Okay, move on to the next slide. So let me move to race and ethnic origin. So racial equality directive is what covers this. It's one of the first EU directives addressing discrimination. It prohibits refusing to hire someone based on their ethnic origin or assigning employees from specific racial groups to less desirable tasks or roles. Broader implications include individuals perceived to belong to certain racial or ethnic groups, even if the perception is incorrect. We talked about this before, where earlier on, discrimination by imputation. Okay, it's the intention to treat people less favorably, whether it be an accurate consideration or not for who or what they are. The benefits, something worth highlighting is the benefits of a racially diverse workforce it enhances creativity and global market appeal, and they're just two things that come quickly, but obviously there's way more. Another question coming now. Are your workplace policies free from unintentional bias that could affect individuals based on race or ethnicity? I'm looking forward to hearing Alexandra's piece on bias later. We move to religion or belief. Freedom of religion and belief is a fundamental right enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It's one of three. It can be religion or freedom of expression or freedom of conscience that are quite hot topic today. These are known as competing rights, where sometimes there's an unintended consequence where people rub off each other with these rights and it causes friction rather than harmony. The protection for religion or belief extends to individuals of all faiths, philosophical beliefs, and aesthetic or agnostic views. So basically, it extends to all faiths for what you believe in, but it also covers you for what you don't believe in, if you don't believe at all. Okay, which is a really important thing to say. Okay, when you talk about religion, it's about the religion that you follow, or it's the belief that you don't have at all. Okay, you cannot be discriminated for that. Reasonable accommodation has to be made. Reasonable accommodation is made, it's expected that employers provide reasonable accommodation for employees based on their religious rights. So they accommodate religious practices such as flexible schedules for religious holidays or breaks for prayer, unless it causes undue hardship. Okay. So like the similar one before, you're expected to do what is reasonable that doesn't cause the business undue hardship. Okay. It would be prohibited to refuse to hire somebody due to their religious belief. It would be prohibited to enforce dress codes that include religious attire, such as headscarves or turbans, unless justified by occupational requirements or national law. This is where we mention the case of France, where secularism is enshrined in law, and rules around religious expression in the workplace may be stricter, particularly in the public sector. So employers must ensure that any restrictions in the private sector are proportionate, justified, and consistently applied, so that they're fairly and consistently applied across all denominations. Okay, so you've got to treat everybody equal. Employers should maintain a neutral environment while respecting employees' rights to express their belief. This is also to be delicately balanced with an employee's beliefs and professional obligations. So you can see here, this is only an introduction, yeah, but there are expectations on both sides. We won't go into it too much today, but just know that it's there, that it's a much bigger topic for debate. A positive example around religion would be an employer providing a prayer room for staff of all faiths to use. A negative example would be a company denying an employee time off to observe a religious holiday without valid business reasons. Remember, reasonability is to be considered in all aspects here. Here's the question at the end of this one. How does your workplace balance neutrality with inclusivity for employees of diverse religious or philosophical beliefs? Sexual orientation. Protection against discrimination based on sexual orientation is a fundamental aspect of EU discrimination law. This applies to all stages of employment, just like we mentioned before, from hiring and promotions, but also to workplace interactions. Okay, we consider workplace interactions in this one. It would be prohibited to refuse hiring due to sexual orientation or creating hostile work environment through harassment and microaggressions. This is one that I speak about, that jumps to my mind. I see these things even going on today, not just in my own work environment, and I don't necessarily mean IADT with regards to this, on a microaggression level, that there's these things happen all the time, and I see them happening all the time around me. everybody thinks that when it comes to LGBTQ that they have everything that they want, and actually, no, you still have to deal with attitudes and old attitudes all the time. I see it in business. I see it in life when it comes to goods and services. I see it in how people treat me differently from the moment they find out that I'm gay. And I have no problem in just, I don't go out saying it all the time, but I certainly don't hold it back all the time. Just like a heteronormative person, I would explain about my partner or whatever, because I should be able to. But I do see people change towards me. Some people for the better, but I do see some people who they become glazed over. Oh, this changes things. Way to be inclusive. So to encourage employers to implement policies explicitly prohibiting discrimination and harassment based on sexual orientation. I think that this one is very important in workforce, that there be an actual policy in place saying that if you do this, there's going to be repercussions. Advocate for diversity training to increase awareness and understanding among employees. When we talk about the LGBTQ plus, it is important to create a culture in a work environment where an employee can feel comfortable about being open about their identity, should they want to. Okay, that's a real positive thing that somebody can do. Create a culture where it doesn't mean bringing people by the hand out of the closet. That might have been politically correct. Sorry, it's what I'm used to saying over here. It's about providing an environment that is there for them should they want to, should they choose to do it. And if they don't choose to do it, absolutely fine, but that it's just there ready for them if they want to. A positive example would be a company with an active LGBTQ plus employee network and clear anti-discrimination policies. I think clear anti-discrimination policies would be helpful in any workplace to act as a deterrent to somebody who may knowingly or unknowingly make a misstep. I'm being polite there. A negative example would be an employer ignoring complaints of homophobic remarks in the workplace. I have seen this too much. People pretending like, oh, it's too difficult to deal with. Can we not just, oh yeah, I know they shouldn't have done it, but can we just, basically meaning they don't know how to deal with it. Here's a question that I have now on this one. Does your workplace have clear policies and support structures in place for LGBTQ plus employees? Laura, can I have a time check? Are we okay?
Yes, I think we're just running a little bit behind
Okay.
schedule here. So yeah, maybe we'll
I go
go through
super
this.
quick?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Eamonn.
Pregnancy and maternity. So essential for ensuring quality in the workplace. They go right the way from the beginning, from planning to have a child, even to after having the child. Yeah. So you cannot you cannot decide to treat somebody differently because of anything got to do with them having children. Okay. The question for this: does your workplace have policies that support employees before, during, and after maternity leave? Almost there now. Then we have nationality. Nationality protections crucial for fostering mobility within the EU labour market. Okay, so in the EU, it is going to be a pluralistic society because of the nature of what the EU is. Okay, so you can't make so it gives people, so no matter where somebody comes from within the EU, they're entitled to equal treatment as locals, but also people who come from outside of the EU legally, yeah, and they have legal residency, they also get treated the same as EU citizens. Okay. Illegals, it's a whole other elite people who don't have legal residency. It is something else, but we can come back to that another time. And we have other considerations. So we're at the end now, Laura. So other considerations that you have to think about dealing with employees. While GDPR may not directly address discrimination, it plays a crucial role in protecting employees' sensitive personal data, including information related to protected characteristics. You might hold information based on disability, religion, pregnancy, and other things. So you must be careful how you handle information. Okay, it's all got to do with employee privacy. These are the questions. We don't need to go through them, but these are all of the questions that I asked today. And if the slideshows are shared, you can see these are things you could just start asking yourself in your work environment. And this is just the key legislation that we referred to. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eamonn. There's so much in that. So well done for compacting it into the just over the 20 minutes. And thank you for including the key questions at the end, because I think it's really important for people to be able to take that away and actually go through each one individually themselves, and to ask the questions about if they're professionals, the companies that they're working in as well. Yeah, really important questions. So thank you again, Eamonn. And Alexandra, if you would like to begin your presentation, please do.
Yes.
When you're ready.
Yes. I'm ready. Thank you. So thank you, Eamonn, for really a lot of information. So what I'm going to do now is skip a little bit of what I did in the introduction of the presentation, because we talked about academia and talked about some legal stuff. And I will focus actually on how we see bias. Do we see bias in the workplace around us? And how we actually react to these stereotypes? How do they influence our decision making? How do they influence our workplace? Can we do better? Yes, we can. And how can we do that? So I will also ask you throughout the presentation to feel free to raise a hand and tell me left or right, or what you mean on what option you select. Yeah. So I usually start my workshops about equity, diversity, inclusion, and asking about this specific picture. So if we speak about equality, like it is here, we can tell, well, we have fair processes in our organization. We give equal treatment to all of our employees, but then we see this in this row. This doesn't mean, okay, equality, but can we all thrive in such an environment? No, unless we look at individual needs, people with specific disabilities needs, people of all genders and sexual orientations. We have to really look at people as individuals and really start to lead our organizations, our own companies from this human-centered perspective. So this is what also Eamonn talked about. What is the actual foundation of equity, diversity, and inclusion? There are, of course, a lot of elements, but it comes down to these essential ones. We speak about equity in the workplace, right? Like we just saw, respecting individuals, respecting people's dignity, and of course, implementing everything into the corporate responsibility. But nowadays, we see a lot of forms being filled in, a lot of formalities, and saying, these are our CSR goals, we are working towards them. But if these goals only remain documented and not actually put into practice, then there's no foundation for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, if we really want to put our efforts and build such an inclusive environment, we need to look at people individually and offer promotion opportunities based on their skills, knowledge, experience, which has to be free from bias. And now, when I was preparing for this presentation, I asked AI to help me. So I said, "Dear AI, please generate some pictures of leaders in modern offices." So this is what I got. All of them were basically the same, right? We can see men here, 40, 50 years old, white, probably European, similar gray suits, maybe some ties are different, but this is what AI sees as a leader, okay? And then I said, well, give me some leaders in a meeting. This is what I got. Basically the same, no diversity in these images. Young, nice, beautiful faces, even standing to show off the power because I asked for a leader, right? But then I had to be very specific. And then I said, AI, generate some images of gender diverse and ethnically diverse teams. And then this was what I got. but I had to be very, very specific on these keywords. And why does this happen? Who creates AI? People, right? And as people, we are all biased. And whenever I give workshops, I say, if you have a brain, you have bias, right? And this is the baseline, and this is the starting point. But also the point is that we become aware of our biases and that we take actions to actually change them. And that's the actual thing that I want to ask from you today, because I really want to open some perspectives and provide you opportunities to see something, to self-reflect, and then take actions. Now, what is a bias, right? It's kind of a stereotype. It's prejudice. It's something that we were born into, something that we really take as granted and not give it a critical point of view, because we want to simplify the world. We want to simplify decision making. We want to simplify hiring, promotions, just going with the flow. And then we fall into the traps of a lot of stereotypes. Now, why does this happen? Because while we grow up, we are surrounded with so many general things. It depends on where we are born, where do we live, which country, which continent, which race we belong to, which gender we are. So this really depends, but generally goes for a high or some kind of social stereotype. Now, if I ask all of you to close your eyes and to think about this situation. So you're entering the hospital. You're meeting with a top heart surgeon in your country and their team. Open your eyes. Who do you see? Is this the surgeon you imagined? You can raise your hands. I can see that. If this is a typical heart surgeon, you would think of. I see no hands so far. Yeah. But then our society tells us that this is a typical heart surgeon, top rated in our country. And this is his team, right? He's got female nurses. He's a young man, successful, and has this type of attitude, right? We can go on like this. If I ask you to imagine a typical kindergarten teacher, right? Would this be the person you imagine? Probably not, yeah? But then if I ask you to imagine a dean of your faculty, would this be that person? Maybe? Yes. Why does this happen in life? I don't know if you read or ran into psychologist Daniel Kahneman. He has developed these systems of thinking. And basically, and I will simplify it, what he tells us is that our brains have two systems of thinking, system 1 and system 2. System 1, it's fast, snap, subconscious. This is the one that doesn't take too much of our energy. We get up, we go to the same bakery, we take the same metro to work, we always buy the same shirt or in the same store. And this is where we don't actually ask more questions. And this is why this is subconscious, right? And this is why this system is very prone to errors. But there is system 2. This one is slow. And today we live in a society where we have to make snap decisions, right? But this system 2 is also conscious, helps us make decisions better. It does take our effort, energy, but helps us make better decisions. And this system, the system 2, is the system that will actually help us break the bias, okay? So every time you imagine a surgeon or a CEO of an IT company, okay? Stop and think, 1, 2, 3. Why does it have to be a white 50-year-old man, okay? Think about how you promote people. Think about how you hire people. Think about whether you judge their performance, whether you judge their potential or just achievements. Okay? Try to look beyond all of the physical characteristics and actually get to know the people that you work with. Now, how does this bias occur in the workplace? There's so many types, and Eamonn also mentioned a lot of them, but these 6 are the most common that actually occur in the workplace. We have likability bias. We have attribution, performance, parental, affinity, and double discrimination. So likability bias is actually really gender specific and gender bias, because it tells us that if women or people who have more female characteristics are assertive and loud in the workplace, they're not as liked. Why? Because the society tells us that, 100 years ago, only men were allowed to work in offices, and only they were bosses, leaders, CEOs, and their style of leadership was the ultimate one. And now, as the ecosystem changes, which is really good, some of the women who hold these high positions in corporations are not really likable, even get some negative attributes and characteristics. Yeah? Attribution bias is a bias where actually we hire people who only resemble us, our way of thinking, our modes of behavior, and in such a case, we develop some kind of armies that are lookalike, right? Like those AI images, like all gray suits, all typical persons in typical positions. And then we actually lose on the innovation, diversity, critical thinking, diversity of thought, because we hire people who will not judge us and people who will not stand up against us anyway. So where's the progress there? It's not so, it can't be seen in such a long run. Performance bias is also linked to likability bias, where we have, like in societal norms, old way of thinking. So when women were not allowed to work, their work was to take care of families, older generations, to be the household keepers. But if they do that, then it means that they cannot perform in a workplace. And this performance bias is still strong, and it reflects a lot and shows a lot when people think about promotions. And Eamonn was also telling about the age bias, which is the double one here. So if we double it with our gender and age, what are the chances that an older woman would be promoted to a leadership position or for some kind of training? Or especially if this person comes from an underrepresented group, some ethnical minority, it then really, really increases. Parental bias is harder also on women than on men. Fortunately, so many laws are changing this, and this is really great. Affinity bias is similar to attribution bias. So, we're only buddies and only buddies can work together. So you see how many of these nuances actually influence the workplace. How do these biases actually affect the workplace? I spoke about hiring and promotion decisions. It's very obvious. We have a lack of diversified pool talent. So many new ideas are left behind. We don't hear voices of people who are really creative, but don't feel psychologically safe in the workplace. For example, a lot of people from LGBTQI plus communities, they feel sometimes in the meetings, I've done a lot of surveys, that they cannot speak up because the idea might get stolen, they might get microaggressions, for example, they might not get too seriously taken, so they kind of withdraw. This all results in unsafe workplace in terms of psychological safety, in terms of rapport, building trust within your team, department, organization, and especially if you're building your own company and starting from the ground up, trust is something that really you can build your teams on. We have microaggressions coming from different groups of people. Of course, these are all inequitable opportunities, and of course, a lot of legal consequences, and Eamonn covered a lot of legal aspects in his presentation. In the end, it's bad image for the company, right? Then it's low retention, then it's low employment satisfaction, then people will just not apply for jobs because, you know, who would want to work in such an environment? When we speak about numbers, this research says that the cost of workplace bias is projected, it was for 2023, to cost workplaces $64 billion, right? And these are huge amounts. Why does this happen? It says that 33% of the workforce feels alienated. So, you know, they don't feel like they belong. 34% of the workforce withholds ideas. There's no innovation. And what was really striking for me is that 80% of people would not refer their employer. And this is something that as a big or small company, you really don't want to happen. More on numbers. If we work on closing the gender gap only in STEM science, it can increase European Union GDP by 80 billion euros by 2050. By 2050, only in STEM, we could generate 1.8 more million jobs if we take into account gender diversity. The same gap in the USA, it says by 2026, it can increase USA GDP by 5.3 trillion USA dollars. So these are huge amounts and huge effects on European economies, right? So it's not just about being fair and being human, but it's also about building sustainability and profitability, right? So what is the actual key and solution is integrating all of these into inclusive leadership styles and actually integrating everything into company strategies. So yes, have it written down, but yes, also check, set KPIs. I have a lot of companies I work with that include diversity, equity, and inclusion into feedback forms. Okay, so leaders are also given some remarks at the end of the year, how they actually play as inclusive leaders. I always tell to people, redefine rules, change the status quo, ask why. It's not about, well, we've done it like this in the past 50 years, but let's change something meaningfully. We want to, of course, ensure equitable opportunities. So it's really important to always raise your voice. Know that your voice has a really strong side. And the key is, of course, in providing support to each other as teammates and being allies. Yeah. And diversity, equity, inclusion, as I always say, it's everyone's responsibility. It's not, I'll go to HR and tell them something. It's not, I'll go to ED&I officer and tell them something. It's how we all behave in the workplace, and the change has to come from each and every individual. More on the statistics. So the teams who are more gender diverse are 15% more productive. Teams who are ethnically diverse are even 35% more productive and more innovative than the traditional ones. And this is why I say that sustainability is not just about being nice, but it's also the road to a better world and more efficiency and, you know, having more actual people-centric workplaces. So for you, how can we break bias? Think about system 1 and 2. How can you switch? Never assume, but ask people and change the rules. Yeah. So I had I want to ask all of you to think about one little thing that you can do today to actually change. Do self-introspection, become aware of your own biases, and take actions to change them. Yeah, so I had a little video I wanted to share, but I don't think we have enough time. I can share the link to the video afterwards.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Yes,
Yeah.
please do pop the link in the chat,
I will.
box there.
I will.
And thank you so much. That was a really, really great presentation. If anybody, we do have a few minutes left. If anybody would like to either raise their hand to ask a question or pop it in the chat box, please do. We do have a few more minutes. I think everybody will agree that they were two really, really good presentations in a small space of time, because we could actually spend all day or a lot more time discussing both all of these topics. I think for me, you know, big takeaways for me, you know, what Eamonn had said about what small changes can make a big impact. You know, never underestimate the, you know, what you're doing and the impact that it can make to your colleagues, you know, and your workplace. And also, Alexandra, what you said about redefining rules, you know, and asking questions and making changes. I think somebody said somewhere that, you know, the most dangerous thing a company can do is to say, this is the way we've always done it. And that is the most dangerous thing a company can say. So thank you both so much. I'm just looking here if anybody has their hand up, if they would like to unmute and ask a question quickly. I'll just give another minute, and if not, we will let you be for your afternoon. Was there anything, Eamonn or Alexandra, that you would like to add before we end the presentation?
No, just thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out, I'm really active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. Think about it, ask questions. I'm really happy to interact with all of you.
Super. And Theodore has just asked if you can pop the video link in, please.
I'm looking for that one on YouTube, and I can't find it. I have it downloaded.
No
just
problem.
let me, yeah.
Even if you can't find it, if you send it to me afterwards, and I can pop it
Thanks.
in to the general email going out to all the students.
Great. I will do that then. Yeah.
Absolutely. And your LinkedIn profiles as well. That would be great. Okay.
Yes.
If we have no questions and I don't see any hands up, I think we will say goodbye, and thank you both so much again. That was really great, and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you all for joining. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye guys. Thank you.